Are there any chances that the history we read might be completely made up? I never thought of it to be as extreme as fully made up, but I like to think of it as similar to broken telephone. The story starts out as the truth, but the storyteller makes small adjustments when writing history to pass down, in which the interpreter further makes small adjustments when further passing down the history, etc. This continues to the point where the history is no longer recognizable to its original source. I really hope I'm wrong on this though. Not completely made up, but definitely slanted to whose version of history you hear. Case in point. I have heard that the American Revolution called the American Rebellion in the UK. Those in power get to write history. When it's not clear whether something is myth, they tend to notate that. Well, yeah. I'm guessing a lot of it is. After I grew up, I looked back at some of the history I've learned in school, and a lot of it just seems like propaganda. Not made up, but biased possibly. You see how easy fake news spreads today. Imagine back when most people couldn't even read to find out if something was true. You just had to take people's word for things. I have no doubt some of what we're taught about history in school is not true. Yes. See the Bible. History is written by those who can afford to write it. Yes. Tons of historical chronicles are written the way through rulers at that time preferred to interpret the events rather than what actually happened. There is truth to saying history is written by the victors. A lot of it is. Not completely. Like things still happened. But our full understanding of why and the specifics of the events are very dodgy. Especially depending on where you live and the event in question. History is a set of lies, agreed upon. History is written by the victor. If you read it on Reddit, then yes. It's all made up to a degree. History is a story we tell ourselves about what happened and why. Sometimes it's mostly right and sometimes it's mostly wrong. But it's never completely accurate because it can't be. History is written by the victors seems to be logically true. Absolutely, definitely not. Completely, no. Lies of omission. What's that saying history is written by the winners? Well, the saying goes history is his story. No. Let me introduce you to the Bible. History is written by the victors. The winner decides history. Religion. It's likely that the events that occurred are true. But how they happened is likely completely made up. Well, history is always written by the victor, so yes. It's absolutely partially made up or heavily angled at the very least. I was taught to look at history through two lenses. 1. History is written by somebody. For somebody, and 2. History is written by the victor. Do with that info what you will. The correct question is what parts of history were not rewritten, and we can verify for sure. Most of history is written by winners. History is written by the victors. So that's always something to keep in mind. Most history is well documented and agreed upon by many cultures and scholars. Most history is accurate. But there are also many dubious texts. Religious tales being the most dubious. I would say the Bible, Quran, and Tanakh and any other religious text are probably complete bullshit written by a bunch of dudes high off their ass or something. There is little to no evidence of anything written in these books. Also, the amount of fucked up things contained in them is concerning. Also, there is a saying, only the winners write history. Only if you read religious texts. We'll never know when the winners took an L, so yeah. History is written by the victors. We will never know how much history was changed or erased by people who won a war. But let's look at this. How do you think the history of the war in Iraq will be taught over there versus over here? Yes. Simply because history is written by the winners of conflicts. What is true and false? There's at least two views. I mean, we came up with the phrase history is written by the winners, so I reckon there's a pretty high chance of it. History is written by the victors, they say. So be certain that you are always told one side of the story. Not completely made up, but as Napoleon said, history is written by the victors. Then you've got plenty of historians who are biased. Same as the people who were recording the events at the time. The Bible, for one, is made up. People think it's an historical document. History is written by the victor. As the saying goes, history is written by the victors. So, most likely, the whole of human history has a masturbatory element regarding whatever group held the most power at any given time. The winners write the history books. Only in America, rolling on the floor laughing. Just look up the 6 Gorillion. Yes, this is called white supremacy. History is written by the victors. So probably not completely made up, but you're only getting one side of the story in some cases. Yes. History is written by the winner. OFC it is. It was written by the victors. The barbarians that prevailed. There was no decentralized fact-checking. No internet. No cameras. No proof. Why do you think it's called his story? Absolutely 100. Our history is fabricated. Civilization did not start only 6,000 years old. Homo sapiens are 300,000 year minimum. Our cousins the Neanderthals may be older and were just as intelligent as we are. We are a species with amnesia. Our planet gets through cataclysms regularly. It makes no sense whatsoever to believe we sat around for 294,000 years picking berries and not progressing at all. We can see evidence of us coming back from the last cataclysm that hit North America the worst by most of the world being more technologically progressed than natives to America. It's almost certain most of the history we've been told is an outright lie or just mistaken. History is written by the victors. So, it's usually their version of events. Yes, there's always a chance, and of course historians will hard disagree. This is their job. Life meaning. They put so much stock into. You can't just tell them it's fake. Just look at today. History's written by the victors. History is written by the victors. Absolutely. History is written by the victors. In their perspective. Imagine history books talking about affirmative action. It was openly discriminating against Asians. But for many it was the right thing to do. Think most Asians feel this way. Asians hardly have any media representation. And their stories are never heard. But you'll read biases based on the narration of the ones wiring the story. History has always belonged to those who got to the publisher first. All the wokeness and revision we see today is to address this mistake. History is written by some guy named Victor. He's a funny guy. Yes, absolutely. Supposedly we are only technically in the 17th or 18th century. I'm not smart enough to recall exactly how or why though. Yes, and it mostly is